Hello everyone, I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RealClearPolitics. Welcome to this edition of RCP's Poll Position. Today we are joined by Jim Lee. He's the president and CEO of Susquehanna Polling and Research. Jim, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome, Tom. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Okay, Jim, well, we're going to talk about Pennsylvania because that's where you just released a poll there with some really interesting numbers. I want to get to that in a minute, but we just had the New Hampshire primary take place. And it looks like President Trump won another solid victory there. It seemed like the polling was a little bit off. Our average had him with like a 19-point lead. Some of the polls had him over 25. New Hampshire's a little bit difficult to poll because of all the undeclared voters. What did you make of that? Was that a surprise to you, or is that kind of par for the course?
I think the reason that the polling might not line up, Tom, with the outcome on Election Day is because you had candidates dropping out so quickly within the last couple weeks between Iowa and New Hampshire. I mean, when Vivek dropped out, there was, a block of votes that presumably went back to Trump because Trump was able to grow above what he was getting in the polling, of course, when you actually look at everything. Christie dropping out, presumably those votes were going to Nikki Haley. So there was a lot of fluidness to, I think, the race there, and I think that made it difficult to really match up the polling that was done prior to Election Day with the outcome on Election Day. Now, having heard what you said about independents, they, of course, are the line that wags the dog in the state of New Hampshire. I mean, there's something like 340,000 undeclared voters, and the real wild card was how many of those were going to show up on Election Day. And would it dwarf the primary from registered Republicans? Now, the turnout was, 320,000, so they did hit a record there. But I think the polling was as good as it was probably going to get, given the fluidness of the race in that last intervening week and a half between Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah, and independents did comprise at least half the electorate, which was pretty substantial, obviously, for the Republican primary. Okay, let me ask you about Pennsylvania, because there's going to be a lot of attention focused on that state. Again, it is one of the, I call them the Big Six swing states, where this 2024 election is going to be decided. You just released a poll there, and with some kind of eye-popping numbers, a lead for Biden. Give our listeners and viewers a sense of what you found in that latest poll.
So the Biden-Trump numbers are 47-39. That's an 8-point lead for President Biden. And I know what you're thinking. This sounds like an outlier. And in fact, if you saw the Twitter feedback on this poll we put out, there was plenty of people that said this just doesn't match up with a lot of the polling. Well, Tom, I've never believed the polling that shows Trump leading PA. I never believed it. Now, I'm not saying Trump can't close a 7-point margin by pulling back into the mid-40s, but I believe this poll. He was underperforming with Republicans, and I think that probably has something to do with the activities in New Hampshire and the contested race for the nomination there. He was underperforming with Republicans in such a way that it was really dragging down his support statewide. Well,
let me ask you about that real quickly, because your last poll that you took, I think it was in mid-September-ish, had Biden at with a 2-point lead. And I think it was 47-45. So Biden's number did not change, but Trump's went down from 45 to 39. So what was the driving factor there that pushed his numbers into the, below the 40% mark?
Again, support that he's losing with Republicans. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're seeing a competition for the nomination with Nikki Haley. And I think it pushed some Republicans back on the fence. He was only getting 77% of the Republican vote. That's not enough. And that was really where the drop-off came from, because in the last survey, he was in the mid-80s back in September. So the fact that he's dropped 8 to 10 points with Republicans, and in fact, Biden was getting 11% of the Republican vote in this current survey, that's not sustainable in Pennsylvania. I mean, the straight ticket vote in Pennsylvania, Tom, is only about 35%. He's getting 39. About a third of the state's voters are what we call affectionately swing voters, not necessarily registered independents, but really voters that are registered with a major party, but still tell us in our polling they split their tickets in most elections. And he's losing independents by 20 percentage points. Now, that's not uncommon in comparison to our September poll. Trump was also losing among independent voters. And in fact, in the 2020 exit polling, Trump lost independents to Biden by, I think, a 10-point margin. But I'm not suggesting Trump's going to lose by 7 points, but I really believe the pathway to 46% or 48% if it's a three-person race is very difficult. And Pennsylvania, knowing how it's broken up into the Philly suburbs and the rest of the state, Trump's underperforming in the conservative areas of the Commonwealth, where he needs to match or excel his 2016 numbers, not his 2020 numbers, but his numbers that he racked up in the conservative areas of Pennsylvania in 2016. If he can't get back to those thresholds, I don't know how he makes up 7 points in a survey.
One of the suggestions that we've seen in some of the data that has come out is that Trump's improving his numbers with African Americans and Hispanic voters. Did you see any evidence of that? I mean, that's obviously one of the arguments would be, yes, he's got to improve with rural voters, but he can offset, let's say, some of the suburban vote that he's not going to win if he can make that up among minority voters. Any evidence of that in your survey?
I think the exit polling from 2020 showed he got about 9% of the African American vote. He's up to 17 in this current survey. But the turnout from Philadelphia will presumably be down. It was down in 2020 in comparison to the rest of the state. It was up in 2016. But I don't think that that's the pathway for Donald Trump to win Pennsylvania. He's got to find a way to appeal to these middle-of-the-road purple voters. One of the most fascinating statistics, Tom, that I saw in New Hampshire last night was that 66% of undeclared voters said if Trump's the nominee, they won't vote for him. 66% of undeclared voters in that CNN exit poll said they will not vote for Donald Trump if he's the nominee. Those undeclared voters are very similar to swing voters in Pennsylvania. They're fiscally conservative but socially moderate. They don't wed themselves to either political party, and they constitute about a third of the state's electorate in Pennsylvania. And obviously, undeclared voters are about 40% of the electorate in New Hampshire. That's the formula for growing Trump's base, and he hasn't been able to do that in this survey. He can't win Pennsylvania if he doesn't appeal to swing voters. And swing voters are two different, really, types of voters. In southwestern Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh market, Tom, a swing voter is someone that grew up in a Democratic household. Their parents were probably involved in the steel industry or the coal industry or textiles. They registered Democrat because that's what they were told to do, but they're culturally conservative. They're pro-life. They're pro-Second Amendment. They are vehemently anti-abortion, but they split their tickets for Republicans, and that's why Trump was able to do so well in southwestern Pennsylvania with those swing voters. But in southeastern Pennsylvania, your swing voter is a socially moderate Republican who's very pro-choice, very bullish on gun control, vehemently college educated, very much so, and really is annoyed by Trump's rhetoric on the immigration issue because southeastern Pennsylvania relies very heavily on an immigrant workforce. And those are the swing voters Trump has not been able to make inroads with, Tom. And I just want to say that when you look at polling in Pennsylvania, a lot of these firms that don't live here, that don't understand how the state's made up cosmetically, are really not aggregating the surveys into geographical regions to really show, I think, the pathway that Trump needs to get to win. It's just not, it's not there in some of these other polls. I'd be very suspicious of some of the polling that shows Trump ahead in Pennsylvania. He's just never been ahead in our polling. He's won the state in 2016. We had him down by 2 at that point. But I really believe that it's Biden's to lose, just given the numbers I'm looking at today. And I really, really think it's going to be a difficult pathway for Trump to make up 7 or 8 points.
You also released Senate numbers, and those were a lot tighter. This gets back to, split ticket voting, or Republicans who, may not vote in the presidential race. But Dave McCormick seems to be doing fairly well against an incumbent senator there in Bob Casey. Give us a sense of why that's so, and whether Trump is ultimately going to be a drag, down ticket.
I don't think Trump will be a drag down ticket. When I looked at the Republican numbers with McCormick in the Senate race, he's overperforming Donald Trump. With Republicans, he was getting about 85% of the GOP vote. That, I think, suggests Trump's not a drag on him. Trump will probably help with turnout because a Trump voter is a McCormick voter. But not every McCormick voter is a Trump voter. And I think that's why McCormick looks pretty good in this poll. I think the other piece of the puzzle here, Tom, is the elephant in the room in this race is Joe Biden. Joe Biden's sagging approval ratings, I think, are suppressing the vote for Bob Casey. Now, Casey, knowing what we know about Bob Casey, he's always been kind of a backbencher kind of a senator. He's not on any real exciting committees. He chairs the special committee on aging. I mean, yeah, Pennsylvania is an aging state, but it's not an exciting committee like, transportation or ways and means or appropriations or energy and commerce, where he can raise big PAC dollars and really make influential decisions affecting Pennsylvania's infrastructure. And when I looked at his legislative accomplishments, they're very thin. Most people in the state don't really know what Bob Casey stands for, but the name has been so prominent for so many years that since he got elected in 2006, he's been able to really kind of build on that name ID. So I think Senator Casey's weak, and I think this poll exposed his weakness because the Associated Press, Tom, I thought was very bullish in saying that Casey has basically been a rubber stamp for the Biden policies. And that to me suggests that the polling we have now that shows how competitive Dave McCormick is really a referendum on the Biden administration and his lackluster poll numbers in Pennsylvania. I mean, the last time we polled Pennsylvania, we had Biden at 39% on job approval. That pretty much mirrors where he is nationwide in your RCP average. So McCormick's race looks like it's the race to watch. I really believe he'll overperform Donald Trump on Election Day. And I think he's in the hunt.
Okay. We will leave it there for today. We're out of time. Jim Lee, President and CEO of Susquehanna Polling and Research. Jim, thanks for your time again. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Tom. Thanks for having me.
All right, and that'll do it for this edition of RCP's Poll Position. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP. Thanks for watching.